What's up, YouTube? I'm Mike, and today I'm back with maybe the end of the MENT cycle. I don't want to say the end of the MENT cycle, but this video I think is going to drive home the point of why, for basically the overwhelming majority of bodybuilders, MENT is just not, it's not a feasible compound to use. I am feeling right now on the MENT phenomenally. I think my physique is absolutely continuing to morph in an amazing way. My waist is getting tighter and tighter by the day. My muscles are looking fuller, more vascular. I have never been so happy with the aesthetic that I'm experiencing. I'm continuing to lower my estrogen level by continuously increasing my ADEX dose, and I have gotten myself into what I think might be close to the sweet spot, but again, I can't know because I can't trust the way I'm feeling. And so I've been doing a lot of thinking tonight about how it is that I'm going to go about managing my estrogen on a drug like MENT that aromatizes into 7-alpha-methyl estradiol that you can't test for. There's no way to know how much 7-alpha-methyl estradiol is in my system. And so that presents a really huge problem when you think about it, when you're trying to figure out how to balance your estrogen levels. So, in the absence of using exogenous estrogen, you really only have one thing that you can do. I could continuously increase my ADEX dose until I truly start to feel the symptoms of low estrogen, which in my case, most pronounced and most easily to detect is a complete disconnection from my wife. Now, admittedly, I experienced something very similar to this with very high E2 on MENT, which has never happened before in life, which is why I was so convinced that it was low. So what we have proven is that on MENT, I am not really capable of dialing in my estrogen by feel, because I cannot always accurately feel what's going on inside my body. But what I can know is that if I continuously increase my ADEX dose, then obviously I am decreasing my total estrogen load. The more ADEX I put into my system, the more of aromatase is being bound up, and the less any aromatizable compound I have in my system will be capable of aromatizing. The problem is that this again is nothing I can test for. So if I lower all I can really do is continuously add ADEX until I get to a point where I'm experiencing again the symptoms of crashed estrogen, which would be a total disconnect from my wife. I will know that that disconnect is not coming from high estrogen because I will have been increasingly dosing Arimidex until I experience the low E2 symptoms. Then, once I am definitively crashed, I can remove like a half a milligram at a time of the ADEX, whatever amount of ADEX it takes to reach this crashed state. Then I would then take some of that ADEX back out, let my estrogen climb back up, wait until my connection with my wife re-enters the scene, and all of the evidence comes together that my estrogen is dialed into the sweet spot, and then I would know, okay, then I could go get blood work, and I could say, okay, how much estrogen do I have in my system for this amount of testosterone, DECA, and MENT? This is where my E2 needs to be at in order for me to be in effectively the sweet spot. Because I'll never know how much 7-alpha-methyl estradiol is in my system. So there is a way to dial myself in by knocking my estrogen down and then stepping back one dose or two, however many it takes, with the ADEX until I return to a state of normalcy. But the problem is that this state of normalcy will only be true at the given doses. Currently, that's 500 milligrams of Test E, 300 milligrams of DECA, and 15 milligrams of MENT per day. If I ever change any one of those three variables, the entire experiment has to be started over again. Because all of a sudden, I will have less compound or more, depending if I go up or down, I will have less or more aromatizable hormones in my body interacting with aromatase, which will then throw out of balance everything that I just tested for with my E2 dose, with my E2 level. So I have to do all of that work to painstakingly figure out how much estrogen I need to be combined with whatever amount of methyl estrogen is in my system to be in the sweet spot. This is a total epic nightmare that there is no good way you can maintain for any length of time. Unless I was going to stay on this mega blast for the rest of my life. Anytime I decide to get off the MENT, lower the test, remove the DECA, change anything, I have to start this entire miserable experience all over again, which puts an insanely, I mean, it's a ridiculous amount of misery, and it's a horrible amount of strain on my marriage. All of this I would be going through so that I could run one compound that is relatively new, and despite the fact that I am absolutely loving the way I look on it, my libido is through the roof again, my sexual sensitivity is very strong. Right now I'm feeling phenomenal on this compound of drugs. But the headache that comes with managing the estrogen is epic. It's absolutely of epic fucking proportions. And no matter what I do, every single time I change any variable, I have to start over from scratch. So I get back to this situation that I was in with test, which is why I'm always telling people that I only ever run either 200 milligrams of test or 500 milligrams of test. Because at those doses, I know how much Arimidex I need because I've already vetted this with blood work. You throw DECA into the mix and now you're back to a guessing game. You throw MENT into the mix and now you're back to a guessing game. So since there's no logical or reasonable way to dial in your estrogen by using an aromatase inhibitor to lower your estradiol to some fairy tale mythical number that only equates to the compounds that you're currently using, that methodology right there is absolutely unsustainable. Which only leaves us with two options. Option number one, take out the MENT. Get the fucking MENT out of the cycle, go back to only using compounds that aromatize into normal estradiol, which I can test for, and then I can very easily dial in my estrogen to a sweet spot. I should be able to go back to dialing it in by feel because I've never had a problem doing that in the past. Option number two is that if I want to keep MENT in the system, because of the fact that it aromatizes into something that I cannot accurately detect, the only logical way forward is to absolutely gobble up all of my aromatase enzyme with an aromatase inhibitor. I have to find a dose of Arimidex or Aromacin or most likely letrozole. I would have to use a drug like letrozole to absolutely eradicate all of the aromatase in my body, or as much of it as I can get rid of. If I can remove all of the aromatase from my body, then the the MENT cannot convert into methyl estradiol. The test and the DECA cannot convert. No matter what aromatizable compound I put into my body, none of them can turn into any kind of estradiol that can bind to any of my estrogen receptors and do their work. Which of course will put me in a totally crashed estrogen state. Which I will remedy, like I said in one of my previous videos, by re-injecting estradiol valerate, in this case, is what I would be using. I would then inject the amount of estrogen I need to put myself right back to the sweet spot. All of the guessing game forever will be gone. The one variable I have to control for is I have to find a way to knock my aromatase enzyme the fuck out of the equation. And then I put the estrogen in at the amount that is necessary to maintain all of my functionality. And then from that point, I am free to change any androgen dose I want. I can go up on test, down on deca, up on mint, take mint out, put deca out, put test in. I can do whatever the fuck I want with any compound because none of them can aromatize. I could take D-ball by the fucking mouthful if I wanted to risk my liver and never have to worry about 17 alpha methyl estradiol putting tits on me in the span of a week. I would be totally free to run any compound I want and always be assured that my estrogen level is going to be perfectly fucking dialed into the sweet spot every time. That is the only way this can be done. I am rapidly beginning to believe that this is the best option for bodybuilders everywhere, is to take this stupid estrogen variable out of the equation. This is the bane of a bodybuilder's existence. And we know that this is something that can and is done because competitive athletes crash their estrogen into the absolute toilet every time they step on stage. So there should be some data out there about exactly how much letrozole it takes to knock out your aromatase enzyme. Now, obviously, they do it in multiple ways. They take out aromatizable compounds too. Obviously, if you take all of the aromatizable compounds out, then you're going to get little to no estrogen. But as long as you're wanting to run aromatizable compounds, it seems like the fucking jury is in that the only way you can do that without just an absolute epic amount of fucking tinkering around, tons of blood work, tons of misery, tons of broken D game, tons of fights with the wife. The only way you can prevent that is to take control of your estrogen completely by knocking out the aromatase enzyme. So that is where I sit today. I basically feel like there is no point in continuing this experiment, at least beyond the doses that I'm already at. If I choose to run this experiment any longer, the only thing that makes any logical sense at this point is to keep the mint dose where it's at, the test dose where it's at, the deca dose where it's at, use Arimidex to knock myself down into the sweet spot, stop feeling any symptoms of high E2, be completely physiologically functioning on all levels, and then just call that good until I'm done with this blast. Pull the mint out, go back to everything that I know is safe and dialed in and proper, and be done with it after that. But if I am ever going to run mint along with any of these other compounds, or really honestly, what I'm starting to feel like as a whole, if I'm going to continue blasting a variety of aromatizable compounds, the only thing that really makes any logical sense is to crush aromatase into oblivion and re-administer estradiol. It just seems like that is the obvious thing to do. I can't think of any downside. The downsides that I've heard trotted out, again, of course, are a whole bunch of guessing, what ifs, and maybes. Maybe you won't have the proper amount of estrone to estriol, whatever. I don't think that matters because I think those are prodrugs of E2 anyway. And you have the same problem on the other side with testosterone. We don't have any good way necessarily of ensuring that our pregnenolone and DHEA and allopregnenolone and androstenedione, all of these cascade of hormones that are precursors to DHT, E2 and testosterone. There's a whole gamut of hormones that precede that, and when you shut down your testicles, you are not going to be assured of getting all of those things fulfilled, which is why people recommend taking oral pregnenolone, oral DHEA. And again, you're back to a situation where if you really feel like those hormones are necessary, now you're back to testing to find out whether or not the orals that you're taking to try to reestablish those levels are actually bioavailable and actually giving you a physiological amount of pregnenolone or DHEA, for example. So on both sides of the fence, you run the risk of, when you fuck with your body, not getting all of the hormones you supposedly need. So the argument that injecting estrogen could upset the balance of other, estrone and estriol, it makes no more sense than the same concern about all of the upstream hormones on the androgen side. So there you have it. I am open, obviously, to anybody who can cast some light on what they have had success with. How are you managing your estrogen while using a compound like MENT? Unless, of course, you've done what I'm talking about doing, which is make sure that all of your doses stay perfectly stable. Find a sweet spot that feels good, and then just trust that that puts you in the normal range and go for it until you decide to stop your cycle. This is something that I could see would be reasonable for guys who blast a couple of times a year. But for somebody like me who's looking for a set of compounds that I can run long term, the only way to run anything, and I don't run doses the same. Like eventually, I've been blasting for I don't even know how many fucking weeks at this point, over 30 weeks. Eventually, I'm going to have to get off these doses and come back to some kind of remotely sane maintenance dose and give my body and more importantly my brain a break from all of these androgens. And when I do that, I will basically have no choice but to take MENT out of the cycle and then start all over with balancing all of my female hormones again from scratch. And it just seems to me that maybe at this point in the game, it's time to take my body out of the equation and take total control over both the testosterone and the estrogen side. Please, in the comments, let me know what you think. What works for you? What have you tried? What didn't work? Has anybody done this? Any competitive athlete? Tell me about crashing your estrogen into the toilet. What does it take? How much letrozole? Again, I don't know whether this video will make it out tonight. I'm shooting it at 10:58 on July the 8th. None of this is medical advice. I am guinea pigging my body for the purposes of scientifically figuring out how Trestolone, also known as MENT, works in the human body. This is not an illegal drug. It is currently legal for use. So YouTube, leave me the fuck alone, my videos. There you have it. As always, thank you for watching. We'll see you on the next one.